The laws of physics are supposed to be the one thing in this universe that we can actually trust. We build our entire understanding of reality on the idea that mass does not simply vanish into thin air without a trace. But right now, the data coming from our most advanced observatories is telling us a story that shouldn't be possible. We are looking at an object known as 3I Atlas, an interstellar visitor that has effectively broken the rules of the game. In a span of less than 90 days, this object went from being a cosmic giant to a ghostly whisper. We are talking about a loss of mass so catastrophic and so silent that it defies every model we have for comets or asteroids. 3I Atlas has gone from a calculated mass of 33 trillion QE down to a mere 260 billion QE. To put that in perspective, imagine a mountain the size of Everest suddenly becoming a small hill while you were blinking. 32 trillion tons of matter have simply exited the chat, vanishing into the void without a singular explosion. There is no massive debris cloud, no fragmentation event, and no chaotic spin that usually accompanies a comet breaking apart. It is a mathematical anomaly that suggests this object is not at all what mainstream science insists it is. I'll be honest with you, I cannot shake the feeling that we are witnessing a glitch in our understanding of space. To lose 99% of your mass in the silence of the drift without tearing yourself apart is something a natural rock shouldn't be able to do. It forces us to ask if 3I Atlas is actually a hollow shell, a machine, or a light sail adjusting its own density as it moves. NASA is frantically searching for natural answers, scrambling to make the equations balance out. But a discrepancy this large is unheard of in the history of modern astronomy. Today, here at Space Nest, we are going to follow the trail of the missing trillions to find what is really hiding in the heart of 3I Atlas. Let's go back to the beginning of this mess between the months of May and September. During this window, 3I Atlas was the most scrutinized object in the entire night sky. We had over 230 observatories worldwide pointing their lenses into the darkness, tracking its every move. The precision involved in this tracking campaign is hard to even wrap your head around. We are talking about an astrometric accuracy of 0.028 arcsec. To put that in human terms, imagine standing in New York and spotting a single coin sitting on a sidewalk in Philadelphia. That is how closely we were watching this thing, and we didn't miss a beat. And during those 5 months of intense scrutiny, something very specific happened. Absolutely nothing happened, and that was the most important data point of all. 3I Atlas moved exactly where gravity told it to move, following a perfect Keplerian orbit. There was no wobbling, no erratic behavior, and no jets of gas pushing it off course. It was just a silent, massive weight drifting through the void, ignoring the solar wind. Now, here's the part that always messes with my head when I look at the data. In physics, silence tells a story just as loud as an explosion. If an object is being hit by solar radiation and potentially venting gas, but it doesn't move even a fraction of a millimeter, it means it must be incredibly heavy. Heavy objects have high inertia, meaning they are incredibly hard to push around. Scientists like Avi Loeb and several other independent teams crunched the numbers based on this lack of movement. They concluded that for 3I Atlas to remain so steady and unresponsive to solar pressure, it had to be a giant. We were looking at a diameter of at least 5 kilometers and a mass of roughly 33 trillion kilograms. That is a 33 billion-ton mountain of interstellar ice. A solid, undeniable fact derived from our observations. We were confident in this assessment because the math doesn't usually lie. We were sure we had measured the giant, and the giant was real. But I can't shake the feeling that this certainty was our first mistake. We assumed that because it was heavy and quiet, it was a typical rock from another star. We watched it for 5 months, and in all that time the telescopes saw no evidence of the rocket effect. This effect usually happens when a comet gets close to a star and starts venting gas, acting like a thruster. This lack of acceleration was so consistent that the detection limit was 300 times more sensitive than the measurements we are seeing today. If there was even a tiny push happening back then, we absolutely should have seen it. So, we built our models on that silence and accepted the giant as fact. But as 3I Atlas began its long drift toward the Sun, approaching perihelion, the giant started to do something that defied every model we had built. It started to shed its reality and behave like something else entirely. What gets me is that this isn't just about a measurement error or a smudge on a lens. You don't get it wrong by 99% when you have hundreds of the world's best telescopes watching. It suggests that the object we were tracking in the summer was fundamentally different from what we found in the winter. Some astronomers argue that the outgassing was simply hidden or asymmetric, masking the movement, but others are starting to push back, suggesting the mass was never really there to begin with. They wonder if 3I Atlas was intentionally staying quiet until it reached a specific point in its trajectory. It is a haunting thought, isn't it? The idea that we were watching a 5-kilometer behemoth only because it wanted to be seen that way. But as the heat of the sun intensified, the mask began to slip. This led us to a discovery that contradicts everything we thought we knew about the interstellar void. Everything we thought we knew about 3I Atlas shattered in December. That was when the JWST finally measured its push, detecting a tiny acceleration that had been invisible for months. It is a whisper in the darkness, moving the object just 13 kilometers faster every single day. But when scientists plugged that whisper into their models, the mountain disappeared. To get that specific push from the gas being vented, 3I Atlas couldn't be 5 kilometer wide anymore. It had to be 1 kilometer wide, drastically changing the scale of the object. Consequently, its mass plummeted from 33 trillion kg to a mere 260 billion. I'll be honest, it feels like a typo in the code of the universe. We are talking about a 127-fold difference in physical substance. It's as if we spent the summer tracking a blue whale only to realize we were looking at a goldfish. The logic behind this shrinking act comes down to a simple but brutal calculation. The JWST measured the gas shooting off the surface at 1,600 km/h. Simultaneously, the object was losing about 150 kilonewtons of mass every single second. When you combine that speed with that amount of material, physics tells you exactly how much force should be acting on the object. For that force to result in the specific acceleration we are seeing today, the object has to be light. It has to be small, or else that little puff of gas wouldn't move it at all. The math is relentless, and it forces us to accept a version of 3I Atlas that is 99% smaller than the giant we saw just 90 days ago. It is a reality that leaves no room for the mountain we thought we knew. This leaves us to wonder if we ever truly saw the object at all. What gets me is that if the object was always this light, the sun would have pushed it like a leaf months ago. Yet hundreds of telescopes saw no movement during its summer drift. To lose 99% of your mass without an explosion or a debris cloud is like watching a skyscraper vanish while you're staring right at it. Some call it a fluffy comet, to make the numbers work, suggesting it is made of fairy dust. But that feels like a desperate excuse for a reality that doesn't fit our textbooks. In the silence of the void, 3I Atlas is acting less like a rock and more like something shedding its own skin. It entered our system as a giant and is leaving as a ghost. It is discarding 32 trillion tons of itself as it prepares to dive back into the eternal darkness. Some researchers wonder if we are trying to force a natural explanation onto something that isn't natural at all. It is a debate that usually stays in the shadows of academia, whispered at conferences. But with 3I Atlas, the numbers are so broken that the machine theory is starting to look like the only thing that actually fits the data. If 32 trillion tons of mass didn't actually vanish, we have a problem. If there was never a solid mountain of rock to begin with, then the paradox disappears. This is where scientists like Avi Loeb push us to think outside the box. He suggests that what we perceived as a 5 kilometers behemoth might actually be a thin, hollow shell, a structure so light that it catches the radiation of our star like a sail in the void. This would explain why it looked massive when far away, reflecting light like a solid object, but it was pushed around like a feather once it hit the sun's heat and the pressure increased. This fits the data perfectly without requiring 32 trillion tons of matter to vanish. It explains the silence in the summer and the acceleration in the winter. It explains why JWST sees a specific force acting on a light object because it saw a light object and it always was. The only thing that vanished was our misconception that it was a rock. This brings up the name Enrico Fermi and his famous paradox. Fermi asked, "Where is everyone regarding alien life?" Maybe the answer is that they are everywhere, but we are looking for radio signals. We are looking for beacons and loud hails, but maybe advanced civilizations use passive probes that look like rocks. Maybe 3I Atlas is the answer to the Fermi paradox drifting right through our backyard. If you wanted to map the galaxy without drawing attention, this is how you would do it. You would build probes that look like the background noise of the universe. Camouflage is a basic survival strategy in nature. Why wouldn't it be in technology? And speaking of technology, look at our own missions. We have the JUICE mission heading to Jupiter's moons right now. We launch probes, we do flybys, we use gravity assists. We are just barely scratching the surface of space travel. Imagine a civilization that has had 1,000,000 years to perfect the art of the flyby. They wouldn't use chemical rockets that run out of fuel. They would use the stars themselves as engines riding the light. 3I Atlas behaves exactly like a craft riding the light. The non-gravitational acceleration is the signature of propulsion, whether natural or artificial, but natural propulsion is messy, chaotic, and destructive. 3I Atlas's propulsion is smooth, silent, and mathematically precise. It makes me wonder if the outgassing JWST detected is actually exhaust, or perhaps it is the sublimation of a sacrificial coating used to manage heat. We use ablative shields on our spacecraft to survive re-entry. Maybe 3I Atlas is shedding a protective layer as it swings by the sun. That would explain the mass loss and the change in optical properties. It's a functional mechanism, not a disintegration event. But of course, saying that out loud gets you laughed out of the room in conventional circles. The scientific community is terrified of the A-word alien. They would rather invent a new type of impossible physics than admit we might not be alone. They would rather break the laws of mass conservation than consider a technological explanation. And that is where the real frustration lies for us here at Space Nest. We are looking at data that screams anomaly, and they are whispering dust bunny. It is a failure of imagination and a failure of courage. We need to be willing to look at the outliers and accept them for what they are. 3I Atlas is an outlier of the highest order. It challenges our definitions of comets, asteroids, and interstellar visitors. It blurs the line between a natural body and a constructed object, and it is doing all of this while leaving our solar system at tremendous speed. We are running out of time to study it. Every day it gets dimmer and further away. Soon it will be just another data point in the archives, a cold case file. But the questions it raised will not fade away so easily. How many other rocks have we missed because we assumed they were normal? How many other probes have flown by while we were looking the other way? 3I Atlas was only caught because of that massive global observation campaign. If we hadn't been watching so closely, we would have missed the anomaly entirely. We would have just assumed it was a standard comet and moved on. It makes you realize how blind we actually are to the cosmic activity around us. We are like a security guard sleeping at the monitor. We wake up, see a shadow, and tell ourselves it was just the wind. But 3I Atlas was not the wind. It was a solid object that became a ghost. It was a heavy weight that became a feather. It was a contradiction that demands a better answer than it's just fluffy. Let's talk about the math of the vanishing again because it is the smoking gun. Matter is energy, it has substance. 32 trillion tons is not a rounding error, it is the mass of entire mountain ranges. If that much material turned into gas, the spectral signature would be blinding. JWST is sensitive enough to detect the chemical fingerprint of that gas. It should have seen a massive cloud of water vapor, CO2, or dust, but the amounts detected were minimal, consistent with a small object. So where is the rest of the mass? Did it turn into dark matter? Did it slip into another dimension? Or, and this is the only logical conclusion, was it never there? If the mass was never there, then our initial calculations were wrong, and our initial calculations were based on the object being a natural rock. Therefore, the premise that 3I Atlas is a natural rock is the error. It is a logic puzzle that solves itself if you remove the bias. Remove the bias that aliens don't exist, and the data fits perfectly. Keep the bias, and you have to break physics to make it work. I know which option sounds more scientific to me. True science is following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to uncomfortable places. It is not about defending the status quo, it is about discovering the truth. And the truth about 3I Atlas is that it doesn't belong in our current catalog of celestial bodies. It is a stranger in a strange land. It is a traveler that plays by its own rules. And frankly, it is the most exciting thing to happen in astronomy in years. It wakes us up from our dogmatic slumber. It forces us to reevaluate how we measure the universe. Maybe in 50 years, we will look back at 3I Atlas as the turning point. The moment we realize the galaxy is teeming with things that aren't just rocks. The moment we realize that natural is not the only category in the sky. But for now, we are left with the mystery. We are left with the silence of the void and the ghost of a giant. I don't know if we'll ever have a final answer for what happened to those 32 trillion tons of matter. The universe doesn't usually give up its secrets so easily, and 3I Atlas is already beginning its long journey back into the eternal void. We are left with two conflicting realities: the silent giant we measured in the summer and the lightweight ghost we see now. Maybe the math is broken, or maybe our understanding of what constitutes a rock in the interstellar darkness is simply too primitive. What gets me is the idea that we might have shared our solar system with something truly anomalous, and we spent the whole time trying to fit it into a box that was never meant to hold it. Whether it was a fragile comet shedding its soul or a hollow machine adjusting its drift, 3I Atlas has left a mark on our physics that won't be easily erased. It reminds us that the silence between the stars isn't just empty space. It's a place where the rules we know might not apply. I appreciate you joining me on this journey into the heart of the anomaly. We are all just drifting together, trying to make sense of the ghosts in the machine. Until the next visit across the silence, stay curious and keep watching the void. This is Space Nest signing off.